Ready? All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Larry Toonforce. I'm going to be the moderator for this town hall this evening, and we're going to start with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. So please stand and. The president of the board, Corey Burgess, is not here this evening, but he is on the telephone, and he will be participating. Amanda Amon, who is the clerk of the board, who will be running the meeting, you might say. We're going to start with Dr. Carolyn Stewart, our superintendent, who will give us a background on how we got here. Just to, again, let everybody know, this is a done deal. This is going to happen. This is not a night to give us 10 reasons where they should spend the money somewhere else. It's not a night to sit back and say this was not a good idea. The idea has already passed and they're moving forward. So tonight is information and opportunity for you to ask questions, for you to bring input, and we'll start with Dr. Carolyn Stewart.
Thank you, Larry. It's on. Oh. I would like to give a little timeline for folks who are not aware. In 2019 and 20, Mr. Burgess and I had a conversation about, we were just talking about good things for the district. I had just come on board as the superintendent, and one of the things that he talked about was recruiting and retaining teachers, and said something about housing, and of course we kind of chuckled because we knew that that probably was not going to happen in our lifetimes. In 2021, and even since then, we have regularly lost employees. We've lost some folks that we've recruited to come work for us because they could not find housing, and so then they withdrew from their contracts. We have lost employees who've been working for us because the homes that they've been renting have been sold and they have been displaced. So in March of 21, I started Googling to find out about teacherage because we knew we were going to be getting ESSER 3 funds, and we did not know how many funds, how much that would be. I was also kind of lamenting and complaining at the Chamber of Commerce Government and Business Affairs Committee. I'm on that committee. And about the fact that we did not have enough housing and that we were losing employees. The conversation then was we can either continue to complain about it or we can think about possible solutions. So as a result of that, and in that, at the end of that meeting, Karen Summit, who is the chair of that committee, after the meeting put together a bridge-to-bridge task team to help with this process. And so from the very beginning, there has been a conversation about a partnership, a public-private partnership, and that continues. In April last year, we learned what our funding was for ESSER 3. It's $10.3 million, over $10.3 million. And we had some rules and regulations we had to follow, which I will go over in a minute. We had meetings with stakeholders. And the Bridge-to-Bridge task team went and looked for various properties to recommend to the board for this project. The board ended up selecting a property that is undeveloped. And there is a photo on the wall on the north side of the room where the property is. They wanted this because they wanted to create a neighborhood. Not take something that had already been designed and try to create a neighborhood from that, but to start and create a neighborhood from scratch. The district could do this, purchase this property from unrestricted capital funds because the price was less than $250,000. And the board could decide to put houses on this property because we're considered a rural district by federal law. And the district board could say that it's in the best interest of the district to have housing for its employees. Since January, The team has continued to work with us. The renderings that you see on the north wall under the photograph, to the right and left of the photograph, were donated to us by a local architect so that we could go to the city and talk about the zoning issues. The items between the two renderings are simply things that we have looked at in the past, all of these discussions. None of those are actual things that we're going to do. It's just that we were continuously looking for various ideas of what we could do with this. We did, in fact, meet with the city on Monday to determine what we could do to move along with this project, and we will be applying for multifamily housing zoning for that property. Right now it is zoned as single-family dwellings. So what you see as renderings are just that. They're just ideas, but it gets us far enough along that we can talk with the city about the zoning for the property and then move forward from there. I have this up so that you know we had 13 stakeholder meetings. We had a housing task team. No, the housing task team is that one from the city, but we had educators and coaches and parapros. We had a team for English language learners. We had a stakeholder group, special ed, homeless, transportation, technology, food service, maintenance and custodial, and health and mental health. So we had 13 stakeholder groups who met and came up with many, many recommendations. When we met with this group, we had to follow some guidelines. ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funds were emergency funds. And so the federal government waived all of the usual typical rules that apply for use of federal funds for grants. And they have a lot of rules ordinarily for grant funding. But for those two funds, grant funds, they just waived all of those. So we could pretty much do what we needed to do with those as long as we were addressing things that were a result of the pandemic. It had to be related somehow to the pandemic. So the ESSER 1 funds were very much used to backfill our budget, pay salaries to keep our people employed during the initial part of COVID. And you can see over here on the wall where it says ESSER 2. ESSER 2 started pretty much last year and this year. And you can see that of the $4 million that we got from ESSER 2, it's over $4 million, it's 4.6. And over $4 million of that went to our employees. 17 teachers who are employed this year in the district would not be employed this year in our district if it were not for ESSER 2 funding. And that will continue into next year from ESSER 3 funding. So you can see that from ESSER 2 funding, almost all of those funds went to teachers and other employees, either as salaries and benefits or as professional development. And we managed, with some rollover, because we didn't use it all, to purchase half of a bus. And then we had money for the other half of the bus from another fund. So we could do it that way. ESSER 3, on the other hand, is considered recovery funding. And so the federal government put all of those, they took away those waivers. So there were a number of things that we had to do with these funds. So on this graphic that I have on the screen for you, the things that are in blue are things that we had to incorporate into our proposal to the Arizona Department of Education. So across the top, you see learning opportunities and continuity of services. A minimum of 20% of the ESSER funds must go, ESSER 3 funds must go for that. And that is in the federal regulations. The state submitted to the federal government the state's plan for how the funds would be used in the school districts in Arizona. And part of the state's plan was that after that 20%, we needed to consider 3 other areas. One is social and emotional well-being, one is safety and health and healthy environment, and the other one is educator recruitment and retention. So when I met with those stakeholder groups, what you're seeing here on the screen is exactly what I shared with them. The other requirements are on the left-hand side. We had to have stakeholder involvement, Therefore, we had those stakeholder meetings. We have to have equity. We have to show that we are spending these dollars equitably across the district. We had to have a program or project evaluation built in, and that piece has since been withdrawn, but at the time it was part of this plan, and we built it into our initial proposal to the Arizona Department of Ed. And we do have to have plan updates every 6 months. So the things that are in blue on this chart are the things that we had to incorporate into writing this grant. I'm going to make the screen a little smaller because I want you to see, I want the view a little smaller because I want you to see that when we had the stakeholder meetings, we were not just considering what to do with ESSER 3. We were also talking about the fact that we can incorporate some things that we need into the proposals for other programs. So you'll notice light green columns on the right-hand side. Those light green columns are all federal programs from which we receive dollars in our district. Those are ongoing programs. We apply for them every year. We have to write a proposal. Mrs. Lott, who's sitting over here in the front row, is our person who does that, and right now she's in charge of about 15 grants. So when we're looking at the information from the stakeholders and their wish lists, we were also looking at where we could put some of those items in some of these other grant proposals, not just in ESSER. But the two dark green columns are what we call soft money. These are federal grants, but they have a deadline. And when the deadline is passed, we don't have the money anymore. They are soft money. Finance 101 for superintendents and business managers is you do not use soft money for salaries and benefits or for anything that you cannot sustain with other funding when that funding runs out. So that's just kind of a quick glance at all of the things that had to be considered. I know you can't read this. It's too small. The summary for this chart are the charts on the wall over here on the left. And I would be happy to provide this information to any of you. It's public information at this point. I just didn't prepare enough handouts for folks because it's about 6 pages and I didn't know how many people we were going to have, but I would provide it for anybody who asks. The summaries are over here on the wall where you see ESSER 3, the 3 ESSER 3 things, and you see only 3 because we wrapped a lot of the social emotional well-being pieces of this grant proposal into the other into other elements. So if you just even looking at this without being able to read it, you can see the lists of things that fall under each of those categories. That we have things in all of them. So you can see that under learning opportunities and continuity of services, we have over $2 million in salaries and benefits. And we have learning tools. Learning tools can be lots of things, but a lot of it is technology for us, and professional development. So you can see that 29.49% of this grant is going toward salaries, benefits, and programs that benefit our teachers and employees. We have a whole list of learning tools. We have professional development, a lot of it. And then you can see some things here where we've rolled in some social emotional well-being because we know that both our students and our employees have issues from this 24 months of tough times. So we're trying to be very supportive. Safe and healthy environment. This is where we are putting a good bit of money into upgrading the systems in our district. So for instance, 50% of the HVAC units in our district are over 20 years old. We replace them through the State Facilities Board when they go down. But we'd like to get ahead of that process. When 50% are that old, we know that the State Facilities Board can't keep up with that. And then for educator recruitment and retention, there's a good bit of money here for our teachers. This involves contract signing incentives that we will roll over into next year. So for people who worked with us this year, signed contracts, that's the teachers. they had a $2,500 signing incentive. So in June, right at the beginning of June, those teachers who've been with us all year will get that $2,500. The same will be in place for next year. We have, the state is requiring training for dyslexia for our teachers. And so we will be using ESSER funds to pay for some of that. And that's for 2 years. It's over 2 years. And then the benefits that go with those things. So, oh, that's not mine. One other thing I would like to share with you, because I know it's questions that will relate to salaries and benefits. I'm going to give you School Finance 101 as quickly as I can right here. So in Arizona, there is a funding formula, and in its simplest form, it is the weighted student count. So how many students were enrolled in our schools last year, and some students carry some extra weight because they are students who require extra services. So for instance, some of our special needs students, some of our homeless students, there are a number of categories that get added. So that's called the weighted student count. And that is multiplied times a base rate. So the legislature says to school districts, you get this many dollars per student. So you multiply those dollars times the weighted student count, and you get the budget for maintenance and operation. That is our main budget. So you see that bucket of money there. For this current year, that equals about a little over almost $15 million. But it is a bucket of money, and that's all we have. We cannot overspend it. We cannot change it other than if there are some adjustments made during the year if our enrollment goes up. But it's based on the previous year. We also get some funding that's called unrestricted capital. And once again, it's the weighted student count times a base rate. So below where it says school year 21-22, you can see that the base rate for this current year is $4,445 and some change. And the base rate for unrestricted capital was $450 and some change per student. So that's how we calculate. Right now, the legislature is talking about a 2% increase in base rate for next year. They haven't decided on a budget, but that's the conversation that's going on right now. And so you can see what the amount would be for next year. I want you to understand that we have a whole lot of other buckets. Remember on that other chart where there were the light green columns? Those are some of these buckets. They all have their own budget. The only two buckets where we can move money in any given year are these two buckets up here. We can move, with board approval, we can move money from M&O to capital and vice versa. All of these other buckets of money cannot be moved anywhere else. You can use the money in the bucket. When the money's gone, too bad, you're done. Okay? So ESSER 3 is one of these buckets. And we can't roll the money into anything else. We can only use it for the things that it is intended. One of the questions that has been asked is, why are we not making competitive salaries? Well, we know how many people we need at any given time to work with our students and drive our buses and those things. And that most of that money comes out of this bucket. You can only pay salaries for so many people. So you can either increase salaries and decrease employees, or you can have salaries and more employees. Somebody recently asked us about, we keep losing teachers to California, particularly to Needles, because it's just down the road. It's pretty easy to drive down there. Here's the difference. Now, I don't know their rate for this year, but we had a meeting last week, and the superintendent for Needles School District was here, and their per student funding for next year is $15,000, almost 3 times what Arizona funds for our students. So their starting salary for teachers is $60,000. They pay insurance not only for their employees, but for employees' families to the tune of $20,000+ a year. They can do that because they have the funding. So That doesn't mean they don't have to have a budget. They have to have a budget just like we do. It's just that their bucket is bigger than our bucket. So I wanted to share that information because I think that will help people understand a little bit. Two things. One is we don't want to pay salaries and benefits out of soft money. When the money is gone in 2 years, it's gone. And if I can't sustain positions and salaries from this bucket, then it means either employees have to go or salaries have to go back down. And we would not ever want to do that to any of our employees. We wish we could compete with California and Nevada. We wish we could. It doesn't happen when you don't have the money in the bucket. I thank you for listening to the explanations. If you have questions for me later in the question and answer, I will be happy to do that. But for the most part, I think you need to hear from the board. Thank you.
Amanda.
Actually, our first, Corey, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Mr. Burgess is going to discuss property and project. That's his area that he has. So, Mr. Burgess?
Thank you for your time. Some of the questions that we have had is, where is this property located? It is on Cali de Mercado, west of Val Vista. And the type of housing we're planning on building at this point is stick-built homes, single units with carports. We're looking at an architectural design that will give us a neighborhood layout, and some of these units will have yard space. Amenities we're looking at providing is that neighborhood environment, ADA accessible units, at least one unit available for emergency employee situations, pet friendly, having landscaping, appliance included, and even some of them move-in ready. When we were asked who would lead this project, Bullhead City Elementary School District chose to hire a construction project manager to oversee not only this project, but some other capital outlay projects that we're working on. This job has been posted, and we are in the final processes of completing that. We currently do not have a developer who is building these homes. We are still in the early stages of this. But when we do get to that point, federal grants have very strict guidelines for procurement and for services and materials. We will put out service requests for the projects, or we may select a developer from the cooperative purchasing contracts. Our timeline for this project, we're looking at May of 2022 to begin our architectural and engineering designs. By June, infrastructure work begins for our utilities, and hopefully by July of 2023, our phase one will be move-in ready. Ms. Amon, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Burgess. If you have questions on property and project, when it comes to it, we'll have Mr. Burgess address those for you. Next, we have tenants. Ms. Charlene Diaz.
Okay, so the biggest question is, who is eligible to live in these housing units? And it's any employee that is employed by Bullhead City School District, be it the superintendent, the principal, a paraprofessional, custodian, bus driver. If you're employed by us, you are eligible to live at this unit. It can, at this point, we don't know how many units we're going to be able to build. And so once we know that, we'll be able to have a little more understanding of how to choose people to live in those units, whatever. The units will be available to families. It could be available to singles. If it's a 3-bedroom and 3 single people want to share and live in one unit, they can do that. So it's available to any makeup of people. Unfortunately, this particular unit, housing unit is not available to other school districts. It is only Bullhead School District. And it's not available to other essential workers, such as firefighters and police officers. They have to be an employee of Bullhead School District, okay? There was a question about if this is going to be a benefit for teachers and it's going to affect their taxes. No, it's not. It is no different than renting a house or an apartment from a private landlord. You're renting a unit, and that's it. It's not going to affect any employees' taxes. And if you have any questions, it's pretty simple. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them afterwards.
Okay. I'm up next. I have leasing. I know leasing's a little bit further out. That's actually when we get prepared to get our agreements together, what exactly we need to have in those agreements. Some of the questions that have been brought to us already are, what will the rent include? Our discussion has to include in the rent not only the occupancy of the home, but a one-car garage, kitchen, laundry, appliances. We're going to include the electricity and gas, if applicable, water, sewer, waste disposal, and the Wi-Fi. That way it's one whole charge for everything at the same time. There's no individual expenses. They'll understand exactly what it would be. We were asked how it will compare to other housing area in the area. How will the district pay for the program, administration, maintenance, operation, and long term? And if there's a profit, where does it go? And that seems to be a really important question that we had that one asked quite a bit. Since it's paid for ahead of time with the SR3 fundings, the expenses, utilities, the fees for the management firm, everything, when we have the rent that comes in, that will be going in the teacherage account that will be used to take care of those expenses. So let's say that, I'll just say a toilet breaks and it needs to be replaced. It would be that money that is used to replace that, not anything that comes out of our M&O or our unrestricted capital or any other buckets for that matter. It would be self-funding at that point. When they talked about the cost, how much would it be? We've done some research. There's homes that are, if you can find a home for rent in this area, they are kind of pricey right now. I looked just today and found a home that was just under 1,200 square feet for just over $1,200 a month. So the idea with this is that the rents would be similar in projections to districts across the country, and hopefully be 20% roughly, this is just a number we're working with, less than what it would cost currently out in the just general public for them to rent. So we're trying to make sure that it is workable for our employees. What will this look like with the district as a landlord? Well, we wouldn't technically be the landlord. We'd actually hire a property management company, and they would service the teacherage account in which rents would be deposited. We were asked, will the renter be charged for repairs? That will depend when we get there. There's some lease agreements that we've been looking up with, similar to moving into any apartments or any houses that you may rent. There's, if there's a damage, you would do an assessment just like you would most places where you kind of do the walkthrough and you mark all the boxes. So this is a sample that I had found when you do the premises and the content, stuff like that, like you would do in a natural rental of a facility, would be things that we were looking at doing. Is there a time limit for staying? Is this temporary or permanent? I know that was another big question that was asked. And this is not to be considered permanent housing for anyone. However, the board has not determined a definition for temporary at this time. So the number of units available in phase one will really be a factor for us. So if we have 5 to 10 units in phase one, we obviously aren't going to keep renewing. We want to allow other people who may need that. But if you're somebody who's currently in the facility and you still need the facility, there's still that need, that's something to take into consideration. Terms of lease, again, it would probably be more of just year to year at this point, kind of, we're looking at July to June, like what your teaching contract would be or other employees' contract would be. It's usually based on a school year. I think those were the main ones that I had. Again, I'm leasing, so we're working on leasing. We're gathering questions. If you have other questions when it's my turn, I'm going to gather all those additional questions. So as we get these and we get closer to that time, it's going to help us determine what we need to include in these leases as well. Not just us doing research on teacherages and finding what we can find. It would help us to have what you know and what you can let us know needs to be in there as well. Next, we have funding with Mrs. Anna Boyd.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to cover funding overall, it was pretty much covered in one of the slides there, and then I'll talk about where we go from here in regards to the funding. So we all know that, or if we've been paying attention, we know that we spent $150,000 to buy the land. It was 5 acres, which is, I guess, pretty decent. I don't know. I don't buy land. So, but I've heard that was a really good price. We have 2.5 million of the ESSER 3 funding. So when we build this, that is our budget. Like, that is like cut and dry. We are spending only that amount. We are not going over that amount unless, of course, we have donations in kind where we can actually, like, someone donated the architectural plans. If someone wants to donate things and things like that, then that's the only time that you're going to see above that. So there's not going to be anything extra. We are going to stick within those means if we have to cut things or whatever like that. And then that goes into what happens in the future in regards to, okay, now that we have these built, what if we can only build 5 or 10 units? All right, so I did look at other properties and teacherages that have been built, and there's quite a few of them out there where they did them in phases because they didn't have the money or couldn't get the loans in order to build as many as they needed to actually sustain their population. And so they did them in phases and used the money and the profit that they would get, if you will, profit, from the rent that was paid in order to eventually build more teacherages. Okay, for property tax, it's a school property, so as far as I know right now, we don't have to pay property tax. That's what was given to us, is that there is no property tax, so we don't have to pay that. Let me make sure I have everything. Okay, so a few things on the funding to kind of understand with what's going in there. And I did a lot of research and I looked into a lot of other housing developments. Almost all of them were built with grants and with loans that they had to pay back. And so the rent a lot of times had to be substantially higher in order for them to pay back those loans and to be able to maintain the property. Many different affordable housing units can go as low as $700, and I would definitely want to push for something lower, or not lower than 7, but you get what I'm saying, lower than what a lot of other places have been doing, because they were doing it because they had a loan to pay back. We don't have a loan to pay back. So everything, every penny that comes in for the rent can be used to sustain the property, to fix things, to do any of those kinds of things, and then eventually to build more housing units so that eventually you have enough to have enough for your population. One of the really good things that I have found with being fully paid, that it does allow us to get a place to where the rent is low enough, because I know that Amanda had said about, we're not sure how long we would have them in the house, but the whole point of it is it's at the beginning, when you only have 5 or 10 units, it's kind of like emergency. You know what I mean? Mojave High School lost several teachers this year because they couldn't find a place to live. Like, the rent went up, or somebody decided they're selling the house that they're renting and they could not find a place, so they left. And we had to replace those teachers, and I think even one of them didn't even get replaced. All the other students had to go to different English teachers because we could not find a replacement. And so if it is low enough that they can save, right? That was one school district, I can't remember which one. I had the paper. No, I don't have the paper. Anyways, where one of the things they found was a lot of people could stay. They had like 77 units, so they were able to do this a lot better with just 5 or 10 units. But people would save, and they would be able to put a down payment on a house. And I can tell you right now, as someone who does rent, I cannot save enough to put a down payment on a house because my rent is too high to do that. And so a teacher might come into this area, they're saving a lot of money to stay here, and eventually could put a down payment on the house. And that is what I would hope would be the goal. And so everything in this can be funded simply from that. So I just wanted to say that extra little things. And then, so if you have questions, that's me.
All right. In our last area, we kind of had some questions that didn't quite fit into each of these little categories. So we have other, and that category is Mrs. Sobrowski.
I want to reminisce a little bit. When I moved here to town in '74, there were 2 places for me to rent. One was Wingfoot Cottages over behind Swanee's, where Swanee's is now. Swanee's wasn't there. And a trailer, a single-wide trailer down here on Coronado Boulevard. My dad almost didn't let me stay because there was no choice. And if I hadn't been so forward as to say, Dad, this is what I'm going to do, then he probably would have taken me home and we would have looked into a job, and I would be down in Scottsdale somewhere at this time. But I am very happy to be here. One of the things that happened to me is what could happen using our units. I ended up with the federal government wanting to build houses here because we were so rural. And you got to remember, back in '74, Hancock was only paved down just so far, and the rest of it was all gravel, and that's where I lived. So basically, I saved enough money to get into what was called a farm home loan, which was basically a federal government loan that kept my rent very, very low and very reasonable until the school district jacked up my salary to the point where I ended up paying what everybody else was doing. So what I'm hoping for this teacherage is that given the 20% that we're going to try to keep our housing a little bit lower, that 20% can be used to get into your own place. And if you have teachers who actually buy their own houses, then you have a permanent resident of the area. And I think that's what we're looking for, because that's real teacher retention, is when you get somebody to say and commit to having their family and growing up in Bullhead City. So that's where I'm at. But we had some interesting questions like, were there similar projects located, and what are the pros and cons? They are all over. Some of the more interesting ones come from the East Coast. They started small. They started with 12 units. They went to 74 units. Then they went to a whole bunch more units until they've actually created their own little neighborhoods. So this is possible. They've been on the Indian reservations for forever. I can remember applying to Chin Lee when I was first getting into teaching, and basically being offered housing on Chin Lee, or at Chin Lee. So I would, and it was cheap. It was cheap. So I'm thinking that those kind of things can happen. The occupancy for the ones that are currently running, I have an 85% plus number down here, but there are a lot of them with waiting lists. They actually, if they have 77 units, they'll have 66 on a waiting list. So these are not going to be houses that are just used for 1 year and abandoned the next time around by the school district, because we will be using these over and over and over again to create this atmosphere that will keep our teachers here, to make them permanent residents of Bullhead City. So I think they're very successful. I was very disappointed, I will say, that I couldn't find any hard data on whether it kept people involved, but there was a lot of what are called ancillary data, which is data that's just word of mouth type stuff. It basically says, I'm really happy that I have a house to live in that I can save money. Or I'm really happy that I have a house that's next to another teacher. So if my kid forgets their lunch, I can take care of that. There's a lot of that ancillary stuff. There is no real hard data. And I'm not sure exactly how you would actually create that hard data. But there is no number that says, yep, 75% of the people stay around for years. The best I could get was that there was one group or one school district that had 77 units for 5 years. They upped it for 7 years, and they've been filled for that whole time. People don't move in and out of them. It's sort of like a regular housing if you were a real landlord. The other question that was interesting is, has the district thought of hiring a contracting or hiring a communication person to assist? We have one. We have one. Lance Ross, in the back of the room, is the information officer for Bullhead City. And he does a really good job. He's had the stuff online. He's had the stuff in the newspaper. The gentleman from the paper is always here at school board. So we have several outlets to the public, if the public uses them. 20%, there's, yeah. This is a good question. What breaks do those of us who have lived and worked here for years and not gotten very much pay increase received since we do not have the housing option? I think Mrs. Stewart basically explained that earlier. There's some bonuses that you get. $200 or $2,500. God, what can, you know, as a retired teacher, I could really think about about that much money coming in for just signing up for another year. So yeah, these people are getting taken care of at the same time. Will they receive a housing stipend? No. They're basically going to be just like the rest of us. We pay mortgages, or we pay rent, or we pay somebody to stay where we're at. So that's about it. Could we provide the rent assistance? No. That's considered a gift, and we can't give tax funds. We can't give those funds out as gifts. Some of the rest of the questions were interesting. Somebody actually said, how does the public stop this from happening? It's not. It's not going to happen. Mr. Toonforce told us that at the very beginning of this meeting. It's not going to happen. This is in the works. It's going to happen. Now, what we have to do as a community is to get around this and make it into a community for teachers and for public school employees. Okay, I think I'm finished.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Toonforce?
All right. You've heard from our board and our superintendent. Now it's your turn. This meeting is being streamed, and it's also on Zoom, so we're going to ask everyone to come up to the microphone. If you want to speak, raise your hand. I'll point to you in a minute. And then we'll have you come up to the microphone. Here's the fun part. You're going to have 2 minutes. The board made this decision before we got here. I have a timer, and when it goes off, you're done. So at that point in time, we'll ask you to sit down and let the next person come to the microphone. Please state your name when you come up, only because if you ask a question, the board would like to answer it and identify you by name. Hilda, you want to go first?
Hi there. I just have a quick question. It's National Fair Housing. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's National Fair Housing Month, as we've been told over and over. And I was down in Phoenix. I just got back, ran over here, and we had a presentation by the director of the Arizona Department of Housing just about these kinds of things. And I asked him specifically about this with the school, and he said, quote, if you take any federal funding, you have to abide by every fair housing requirement, and you cannot pick and choose who goes in there. So I just wanted to I made him repeat it twice. So I just wanted to let you know, please, if you need to get a waiver, have you talked about this with anybody, or is the director of the housing mistaken about this?
The information that we have is because it is on school district property and it is teacherage. By Arizona law, teacherage is housing for school district employees.
With federal funding?
Yes.
Okay, I
And,
would double check it, because
absolutely.
I specifically asked him about this situation.
Absolutely, and we've had long conversations with with our attorneys to make sure.
Okay.
Now, the piece of fair housing that we would absolutely make sure that we abide by is that a percentage of these units would be ADA, they would be
Right, of
accessible, because we have employees that, we wouldn't want to do that.
I have another question in my 2 minutes. I spoke with you several months ago, and I asked you, you didn't know the answer. I'm hoping you have the answer now. If the tenant doesn't work out in the school district, is he or she afforded all the same rights as regular tenants? That's part of the fair housing.
Are you meaning like if their
If they're
contract
fired,
is okay?
yeah, for
okay.
whatever reason, it doesn't work out. You have to give them the same kinds of things that you have to give to other tenants, regular people have to give to tenants?
They'd have a you know, a termination date, you know, of when they would have to move and those kinds of things. In terms of the others, I'm not sure. We haven't addressed that with the attorneys at this point, but we would certainly make sure that we did.
All right.
We don't want to do things that are illegal.
Next.
Hi, I'm Nan Nickel, live in Fort Mojave. And I just had a question. I was a broker in California, and the fair housing law were very strict at the time. And the last time my license expired was in 1999. And we know a lot of things have happened since then. To me, it's a lot stricter. And all these things under the fair housing, discrimination in renting or buying a home, getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, or engaging in other housing-related activities. If anyone feels that these things have been mishandled, they actually have the right to sue. So I'm very concerned that we would have a situation, and hopefully I'm wrong, that someone would say, I was discriminated against because of whatever. They just, there's all these reasons why they can say they were
Can
discriminated.
they speak in the microphone? I cannot hear
Oh,
them.
sorry. And so I'm just worried that this might open the door to lawsuits and things that maybe haven't been considered. But maybe with the other ones, they've already considered this. You have a track record? I don't know. But I am concerned about that, and I'd like to know that you folks have a good reason to feel comfortable. That's
That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nan.
Who wants to tackle that question?
Well, I don't know that we necessarily have the answer to that, because that would be something that would go along with our leasing and making sure that we have it spelled out to where we're not, you know, discriminating against anybody for any reason. So, but that's definitely something that we've got wrote down that we can look into and speak more with the attorney when we look at the verbiage and we look at the things that we're going to do to put in there to make sure that we are following those federal guidelines and not discriminating.
Amanda, I believe that Dr. Stewart has had conversations with at least one school district that has a teacherage where they have experienced a lot of this stuff, a lot of them, and that they will be able to give her the guidance so that she'll bring it to the board.
Absolutely. I had a 45-minute conversation last week with the person in charge of the housing for LA Unified School District. And as Anna said, their housing was all funded with loans and low interest loans and those kinds of things. And so, you know, he talked about the fact that they had some issues with the fair housing that they, of course, had to do relative to the loans. So, and he'll be available to assist us with any ideas, but we'll be looking for anybody who's doing these kinds of things so we don't fall into any of the pitfalls that they might have had. We want to make sure that we're avoiding those right up front. The number of houses that we actually can put, say in phase one, is going to determine a whole lot about how that selection process. You know, our pie in the sky dream is the 20, and so, you know, how the board decides that process when there are 20 is very different than if you only have 5 units. But it's also a matter of having that property management company, because they're going to have to follow some of those guidelines. So those are excellent questions for us to follow up on. Thank you.
Come on up.
You brought up a good, or everybody here, it's a done deal, it's a done deal. Well, I think the young lady on the federal issue brought up a pretty
Speaking to the microphone.
good point. I think that the young lady brought up a good point, excuse me, about federal, and if the Arizona gentleman in real estate doesn't recognize the teacher clause that you said, are we sure that the feds are not going to come in with that with lawsuits and everything else that could be levied against us. But if Arizona doesn't recognize it, how do we recognize it? Does that make sense what I'm asking? And you guys have policy and procedures for teachers that don't pay. You know, they're gonna have family problems, they're gonna be behind on the rent, they're not gonna pay the rent, all kinds of divorces. You have policies for that. Are we picking up the tab when they can't make a payment? We, the taxpayers. Anyhow, some policies like that should be pretty stringent.
Okay, so adding in some definition, some information on policies if there were someone to have a divorce or split or can't pay or something happens. Okay, I got it.
And
It's
I
gonna
can,
happen.
I can
You know,
also,
it's gonna happen.
well, I can also answer that because the practice in any place where this occurs is the rent or the
It's coming
payments are
out.
taken right out of their salary before they get their check.
And that just complicates the issues with them. Now you got kids that don't eat, blah, blah, blah. I think that's kind of a problem I don't think you want to get involved in.
So that's
But-
kind of similar to like insurance, like our insurance comes out before we get our paychecks. So I already know like that's coming off the top. So I do know like things like that are already built into our contracts. Like if you do a scholarship, if you do River Fund, if you do Mojave High School scholarship, a tax credit, we sign up. And so we know what comes out of our paychecks ahead of time. So like I know that I would then be able to go, okay, that much is that.
You brought up a good argument. We're not paying enough, or we're not paying enough salary, and now we're gonna start to take away. Because I just think you're gonna open up
Well, to
a
point out,
terrible work environment.
well, to point out realistically, well, one, we are trying to make it affordable, and I would definitely fight to make it as affordable as possible. But also, if they didn't live with us, they would have to live somewhere, and they would have to pay rent somewhere. So somewhere out there, they would have to do
I'm
that.
not
And
arguing that point.
I know, but
I'm arguing the point, you start getting in fistfights with your employees because they can't pay.
no,
They've got issues that, you know, beyond their control.
yes, and they would get in that with wherever they would be living. Like let's be realistic, they would have issues
I
with
just don't
wherever
want
they go.
taxpayers paying a lot of money for
Well, and
things that could have been solved prior to the.
Yeah, and the idea behind is where the money goes would go into there, and if there was an issue or, like I said, a toilet broke or something, it would come out of there. It wouldn't come out of the taxpayers, it would come out of the teacherage account that would be with the property management.
Today. We have to look at the future. Thank you.
Ashley?
The property's fully funded too. I don't understand where that's coming from.
Hopefully I'll be able to send them to Carolyn and actually get the answers this time, because I didn't get them the other day.
I can't hear her.
Ashley, can you
Mike.
speak into the mic, please?
Yes, of course I can. So she had mentioned that they're gonna be having these individuals get their paychecks taken out. Is that, have you gone through the legalities of what that's like on being able to take somebody's paycheck for the cost of rent?
Having lived in teacherage in my past,
No, I'm asking you if you've,
Of course,
if
it's
you've
legal.
gone through it.
It's like,
No, I haven't.
And
We
it's-
haven't
and
had a
you-
teacherage,
you've
so we
already
haven't had
talked
to.
lawyers,
Yes,
and not just your educational lawyers. I'm talking about real estate lawyers.
no, not real
So you guys
estate.
haven't gone through any of the legalities for leases or what is gonna happen? So she says, oh, well, it happens everywhere, but the fact is, if an employee is terminated, are you gonna let them live out that lease?
No, probably not. That
So
will
how
be a
are you
board
gonna-
decision.
Okay, but how are you gonna throw them out of a leased home?
That
So
would have to be
these are
part
things
of
that,
what
you
gets
know, I don't
developed
So
in
she
the
asked
leases.
that question, we're gonna have to look into it. If you have more questions, I'm just saying.
So I have my 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank
you might
I
wanna
got my
keep
2
going.
minutes. Yeah. No, and I think that I feel sorry because our government constantly makes decisions without getting information first and knowing exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. You guys don't even know how much this is actually going to cost. Cost inflation is going up the roof. It's crazy. Do you know exactly what per unit is going to cost?
$2 million and whatever dollars.
Per unit?
We're going to
Not
get
per
whatever
unit.
we can get
No,
with
I'm
the money we
asking-
have
I'm
available.
asking a specific
The
question,
going
Carolyn.
rate,
Do you know how much each unit is going to cost?
estimate, yes.
What
In
is
the
it?
conversation, $200 a square foot or slightly over that. So whatever it is that we can get for The amount of money we have is what we would do in phase
Right,
one.
but your whole spew in the beginning was 20 units, correct?
That was our dream, yeah. I mean, and that's the phase up through phase 4. We know we can't do that at this point.
I just think it's irresponsible, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Sir?
I apologize for my appearance. I just came from football practice. Not exactly board appropriate, but that's okay. So, quick questions. So first, I'd like to point out that there is no loan, right? You're not borrowing funds. And because there's no property taxes, let's say worst case scenario, not a single one of them is rented, it still doesn't cost the taxpayers anything.
Correct.
That's something I think the public needs to be aware of. Worst case scenario, nobody rents them. There's no loss. There's no taxpayer responsibility. We're not on the hook for anything because they're paid for in cash and there's no upkeep, right?
Correct.
So keep that in mind, taxpayers, that there is no way for this to come back on us as a taxpayer.
Guys.
That's the first thing. So that's worst case scenario. Now, my next question is a little more complicated as far as best case scenario. Best case scenario, they're all rented. We have phase 1, 2, 3, 7, 14, and everything's wonderful. And now you have 300 homes. I have no idea, right? At some point, you're going to say enough is enough. And because we know how real estate works, you're going to have quite a bit of money coming in. And that money isn't going to building more units. And it's more than enough to pay for the maintenance of those units. What do we do with the surplus? Does that mean the rent gets just cheaper and cheaper and cheaper? Or can that money spill over into some other district? It can't. It has to stay with the housing development. Mm-hmm. So then I guess, I know this is probably 20 years in the future perhaps, but when that comes to pass and the school district is flush with money for money that they can't use in their district, what do we do with the money? Yeah.
That's a dream. I love it.
No, I bring that up. Anybody who understands real estate and follows guys like Grant Cardone and follows guys that understand real estate, that is a potential. You as a school district has the greatest advantage ever of, at this moment, free money from the government and no property taxes. It's a given that you're going to make money. It's undeniable that the district will be fine because it can't go bad. I think the taxpayers need to understand that. The numbers can't be against you. So when it goes well, what then? I'll sit down and listen to the response.
One thing I can say is there was one housing district that I had seen that was a teacherage that had a gym and it had a pool and it had 2 playgrounds and it was fully fenced with security and it had over 100 units and almost the entire teacher population lived within that community. So I guess that's what we could do.
That's a dream.
Okay.
Thank you.
Saying, if you have it.
We have a
it's
Zoom
already
question.
there. I have to work with what I have.
If the rental payments will be automatically taken out of paychecks, will it then be out of pre-tax dollars? That is a definite advantage over the employees who have to pay their rent mortgages
Can't be.
out of after-tax dollars.
Well, that's a good question. And Dr. Stewart just said it cannot be. It cannot come out pre-taxed.
It's just like when when any of us sign up for River Fund or any of those things, the taxes are already determined and then the money comes out. So it cannot be paid pre-tax.
Other questions?
All right, so I know I only have 2 minutes.
Your name first?
Ava. But I will speak to what would be lost if this is not successful, and it would be your initial buy of the land for the $150,000, which I would like to know what else you could have done with that money, because it was part of your unrestricted capital budget, which could have gone to the teachers. I would also like to know or understand better what you are doing for other staff members. They are feeling like the ones who would be getting this housing would be getting more than they are. And even if you get to that 20%, which would, off of, let's say, a $1,200 rent, that brings it down to $960. The $2,500 incentive bonus that you spoke to, Ms. Zabrowski, was only instituted for this past school year. And I know that because I was a previous employee and I signed on for that because of that bonus. Now, I left the district, so obviously I did not get that. But that $2,500 bonus is not a mainstay as far as my understanding. And so that would not be in place of, well, we're not going to give you a housing stipend, but you get you get that bonus at the end. And that's also before taxes. The $260 that would be that 20% number off of a $1,200 rental idea is $2,800 plus, and that's not before taxes. That's like the real deal, $2,800. So there's a large discrepancy there, and I do think you guys have to consider, if you're really gearing this to say, yes, this is for the retention of teachers, you're not paying attention to the staff that is here in your district right now, in my opinion. And I was one of your educators, and I say that from experience, and I say that from the heart. This project is not retaining the teachers you're about to lose, and I would like you to really consider that.
Yeah, Mr. Burgess, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Do you want to answer any of these? We keep popping. I forgot you were there for a minute.
I would like to address the one that was just given from Ava.
Okay.
I understand that we're not able to help every single teacher, but just because we can't help everybody doesn't mean we don't help anyone. We're doing the most we can with these funds, and as Mr. Beck said, this is a winning proposition for our district. There are a lot of questions that still need to be answered. We are working on that, but we are absolutely heading in the right direction. And Ms. Zabrowski had an excellent point when she said earlier, we need the community to help us in this program to make it better. We have an enormous opportunity here that I never truly believed would be possible, but now it is. If we get everyone behind this program, this could be absolutely phenomenal.
Other questions?
Well, I'd like to just one more follow-up on that. I mean, to talk about what we've done for the staff now, and I understand that the $2,500 isn't sustainable maybe for the future, and it's currently a signing incentive and the risk compensation we've done, but we've also hired 17 teachers, 17 positions. 2 years ago, we also hired 16 coming into the next. We've been able to hire aides and all different people, send to PDs and buy curriculum and supplies that we never would have, and we have, where we've spent $5.5 million just on salaries and benefits alone, not including all the other things that we have done. So we've done a lot for the staff as well, and then this is just another added benefit that we can try to help somebody. And I like what Mr. Burgess said, where he said we'd like to help somebody. Like we just really want to try to help somebody in our district, and if that could be one, and maybe it's someone who falls on hard times and they need that opportunity to have someone be there for them and have a place for them. This is what we need. We need them to have that opportunity so we don't lose them. Like Mrs. Boyd said, we had someone leave at semester. We had to divide up those classes. I know it's happened at the elementary where classes get fuller. Teachers, have to absorb those extra students because somebody had to leave due to housing. And then, or we have long-term subs teaching our students, which is currently what's happening because it's hard to find those applicants when they leave mid-year and don't have a place to stay. So I know that's difficult.
We also have teachers teaching on their preps.
Yes. I think we saw a hand in the back.
Right.
Would you like me to get to the mic?
There you go.
So I came here really kind of upset by this whole thing when I saw it on Facebook, but I got to say your presentation answered a lot of my questions. I have worked for jobs where my rent came out, taxes were taken out, and then my rent was taken out. You're not always going to make everybody happy 100% of the time, so I kind of haven't always agreed with this board, but I say this has to go forward. If it helps 5 people, if it helps to some woman who ends up in domestic violence and needs a place to go, I think that having that available as an emergency place to go and still keep her teaching job, I think is a bonus. So I'm just going to say go forward and have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what was your name? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Sir.
Good evening. I'm a teacher, so I don't think we'll have a problem hearing me.
Your name,
I got
please?
a couple things. I'm
Your-
not very short-winded, so I'm going to.
Your name, please?
My name is Bill Ernest, and I teach right next door at Bullhead City Middle School, 5th grade. Okay. I got a question in reference. Well, a statement first to the gentleman that spoke to about there's no loss. The whole goal of doing this is teacher recruitment and retention.
Could you please speak into the mic?
The whole goal of this project is teacher recruitment and retention. If the units sit open, sure, taxpayers aren't in anything, but we didn't solve the problem either.
Right.
And it was a waste of time, a waste of money, and a waste of effort. Okay, so there is a loss there. You spoke about the teachers living in the apartments till they got the money together to buy a home. Well, if they're not making enough money to pay that apartment payment, how are they going to afford a home would be my next question. Okay, which seems kind of logical to me. We're hurting for money. And the third one, on this document you shared earlier, when I looked at the totals for a home, the home building process, it came up to $3 million, not 2.4. I'm kind of confused. I was looking for clarity on that. Okay?
I can answer that one,
Okay, go
Billy.
ahead.
The, originally, we were talking 2.4, and then as with anything in a grant, and you start looking at, okay, well, this won't work or that won't work, and we understood some finances relative to prepping the property and that kind of thing, we rolled some other dollars into there. So
Okay.
what you have in front of you is, and what's over there is what is designated. So Anna didn't misspeak on purpose. That was the original number.
So $3 million is coming out of ESSERS to fund the housing that you're going to build. Okay, instead of 2.4 million, which is a 25% increase. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then I can answer about the thing. The whole point is to have affordable housing, so it would be, like, I don't want to speak in regards to that, but I know I would push for a lot lower than 20%, unless, of course, rent goes significantly down anyway, which eventually, hopefully, the housing market will burst eventually, as it usually does. But I would definitely want it to be to where they can, in fact, save and purchase a home eventually. And I do think this is possible. My husband is disabled. He does not work. He works at home, or basically stays at home, takes care of the home. We live 100% on my teacher's salary at Mojave High School with a $1,200 rent. All right, we still have a car. We still are able to buy groceries. I can still get health care and all that jazz. I am still able to fund my addiction with yarn, you know. So this idea that it is 100% not a livable wage, I would say. I mean, I have a friend who's a nurse practitioner, and his wife is a nurse, and they're always broke. So I guess the question is what are you doing with your money? Maybe it's that $750 car payment you have. So there's things that people really need to think about when it comes to whether or not this is affordable or sustainable. Are you smart with your money, or do you have a $400 motorcycle and a $500 car, and you have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and you know, we can go on and on and on. But as someone with a disabled husband who lives 100% in a $1,200 rent house, pays my bills, they do not cover my electricity, they do not cover my gas. I have Netflix, I have Hulu, and I have Amazon Prime, and I pay $1,200 a month in rent on my salary alone. So if the rent is lower, and they actually, the minimum I think that the teachers get paid here is pretty much what I get paid. Okay?
So
They might make a little bit more, or maybe the thing, but my point being is if the rent is low enough, it is 100% possible, like anyone else out here who has probably purchased a home or has done things, you have to make sacrifices, you have to make decisions in order to save up to make a down payment on a house. But from my experience, it is possible, and if we can get the rent as low as we can to where it is understandable, it is something that we can use. I mean, heck, if I had a $700 house payment right now, that's $500 extra bucks a month that I could have to put for a down payment on a house. But I don't, because my rent isn't that.
So the one thing I would say, Bill, like that I would say to you is I do agree with you in the fact that if it sits empty, it's a loss. Because to me, that means we're not helping somebody. That means that somehow we missed something. And I do feel that if it were to sit empty for some reason, that it would be. But I don't see that as a problem. I really feel with what we've gone through in the high school district, the elementary district, and all the districts around us, of the teachers that have left due to not being able to find affordable housing, we will have a wait list for those. We will have a list of renters wanting in as quick as they can because they understand, or new teachers coming to the district, or veteran teachers that, like she had mentioned earlier, there are teachers that have had people, their landlords, come to them and say, by September 2023, we're selling your house. Sorry, we're giving you a year and a half heads up, because the market is just too good and we have to sell. Our accountant had recommended it. And there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to continue on. So I hope that we don't sit empty so we can help somebody, because I would agree that if it did sit empty, it would be a loss. It would feel like a loss, at least to me.
Any other questions? Any other questions, sir?
Yeah, so you're making.
Excuse me, I'm calling on him.
I'm sorry.
That's good.
It's all right. Didn't see your fingers.
My name is James, and Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Stewart. Dr. Stewart and I had a conversation about this at one time when I saw her at an event, and I'm in support of it. I think it's good that we're thinking of other options for teacher shortages. My question is that if the 2.4 million, or now 3, wasn't used for this project, what would it be used for? Would it be used for teacher salaries to give raises? If so, how much and how long would that last?
Right.
At some point, like you said, you've got to replace that. Here you have something that you don't have to replace, that gives some teachers it's a continuing benefit for teachers, maybe not all of them, but those who need it. And then let's say you can fund, how long if you gave raises, let's say 3% raises to your teachers, how long would that last for? Maybe 14 years?
Not even.
Not
Can't
even.
even use
Not
that.
even.
With
Yeah, so
the
as-
issue is the
yeah.
money stops on September 30 of 2023, and then whatever's left rolls over for one more year. But whatever is not spent on September 30th of 2024 is gone.
So with that, with these are assets. You're gonna have these homes that 15, 20 years down the road, they're generally real estate here in Bullhead. I've been here 3 years, and real estate in this area has gone up considerably during that time. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. But you're gonna have that asset at the end of 20, 25 years, 30 years, that if you need to, you can get rid of it and sell it. You're still gonna have that pot of money. So I don't see a loss here. The other question that I have, and I'll wait for the answer, in your spreadsheet presentation, you mentioned that the ESSER funds are soft money, right? So my question is, we don't use soft money for salaries, because then at the end of that, we have to replace it. But it appears
Correct.
that that's what we did.
And
So
I-
I think that's a question that we need to talk about too.
And that's a great question.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So ESSER 2 and ESSER 1 were both emergency funds. And when schools were shut down, one of the things that fortunately the folks who shut down schools said, keep your people employed, do what you need to do to keep them employed. And so that's how we use those funds. And because ESSER 2 is also emergency funds, our budgets, I talked about the buckets. One thing I didn't emphasize, I said it, but I didn't emphasize it, is that our budget for any given year is based on our student enrollment the prior year. So during 2021, our enrollment dropped by 350 students. So the budget that was originally arranged for this year was based on 300 fewer students than we'd had the year before. Now, the good news is that we've gotten a number of those students back, probably about 250. It might not be the same 250 students, but we've gotten about 250 students back. So the budget for next year will look better because of that increase in enrollment. But to keep our current students, so we started this year with almost as many students as the year before last, not last year. And so we needed the teachers. So we could justify saying we can pay for these teachers so we can serve our kids. Our budget was affected by COVID. We can serve these kids, keep our class sizes decent, but we know that those positions will either need to roll back into our regular budget or some positions will go away. But the beauty of that money and keeping those positions is that we could keep our class sizes a lot smaller. And this board agreed to capacity for our classes so that we really could give the best effort to helping our kids. They didn't lose education, but they did lose opportunities for some education during that 18 months. And this lets us have lots more focus per student than we might have otherwise. So in that case, it is short-term salaries. It's 17 positions. Next year it will be 18 positions that are funded with this money. But at the year after, we either absorb those positions back into our regular budget or we figure out something else. So, and those folks are making the same salaries the rest of our teachers are making. It's not like it's less money. It's the same salaries. No, they were existing positions that we got to keep. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Those were existing positions. So had we not had ESSER 2 for this year, 17 of our current teachers who are working with our children would not be employed by this district. Class sizes would be bigger, considerably bigger, at all grade levels. And some things would not be so good in those classrooms. So yeah, they were existing positions. And that was the intent of that money, was to keep people employed. I will say that ESSER 1, which was a hair over $1 million, kept our bus drivers employed during those 3 months that we did not have kids in school. Because our budget got cut for that year. The budget had been approved, but it was cut. So it kept our folks employed. So kudos to any of our legislative people for saying this is an ugly situation, but let's do everything we can to keep current employees employed. And we worked at that. Excellent question.
Okay, we have another Zoom question.
I'm curious about the cost of developing the land. Is there any water, electric, sewer, etc. already set up? Also, would this land project ever be able to be sold in the future?
Is that for Corey?
Is that Corey? Yeah, Corey.
Mr. Burgess?
The infrastructure is currently not in place, but we are working on that. That is in our budget of our entire project. As far as selling this in the future, I will have to defer that to Dr. Stewart. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't really know the answer to that either. I suppose at some point, if we felt that it was not, if the board felt that it was not a viable project, it could be sold. The difficulty then is you've got a pot of money in a bucket that you can't touch. Can't use it for anything else, as far as I know. But we would have to look into what would happen if we sold.
Come on up, ma'am.
Okay.
Did I understand you to say that...
Your name, please?
Penny Davis. Did I understand you to say that utilities were included with the rent?
So that's one of the discussions that we are having, is to include it all together so then it's one joint package for them. I know that you'd mentioned MEC wanted to reach out and partner, and somebody else about possibly Wi-Fi. And so it would be, we would try to develop a package.
Who in their right mind wouldn't crank up the air in the summertime and crank up the heat? How are you going to regulate that and take care of it? Because where I live, We don't turn the heat on much. I take showers without the heat on all winter because we pay our utilities. And we don't use our air conditioning to the max until, you know, I mean, we don't use it to the max. So how are you gonna do this with rent? I mean, why would you move out? If your utilities cost more than your rent, hey, who's paying it?
Good question. And that's one thing that was in here. It was a suggestion, and one of the things we talked about was including it all together. So, I mean, that would be something to look at if say somebody liked it like an iceberg in their house, you know, how would you regulate it? Would there be an allotment if you went over 250, then would they pay? You know, so that's all things that to look at.
Yeah,
so that just
because-
posed more questions just asking that one.
Because
So
who would not crank it up? Or
no, I'm just kidding. I hear you. We don't turn our air on. We leave the doors open as much as we can. Yes, I hear you.
if you don't pay, hey.
Questions? Sir?
That's a good question.
Hi, my name is Carrie, and I think this is a really bad idea because I own properties and there is a lot of maintenance and you have to budget for that and you have to have insurances and all that. I think you guys are just way out of your realm with what you do. But Carolyn, you mentioned social emotional curriculum. Can you explain that?
No, I was not talking about curriculum. I was talking about that we had to build in there considerations and ways of helping our folks deal with the effects of the pandemic. So we're talking about physical health, we're talking about emotional health of our kids. And so we have our counselors and we have those things. So we wanted to make sure that they had the materials that they needed. The counselors had the materials they needed. We wanted to make sure that our health offices have what they need. We want to make sure that our employees have what they need, because this has in fact been traumatic for probably all of us. I suspect everybody has experienced some trauma relative to this. We're not talking about curriculum and about teaching things here. We're talking about providing health services for our students and our employees.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Brian Burgess, Bullhead City. You said they would not be paying property taxes? Is that correct?
It's school district property, and school districts do not pay property tax.
Okay, this is a housing unit, it's not a school.
It's still school district property.
As it grows, 5 units, 10 units, 20 units, like the coach said back there, 300 units, you're using the services, you're using the police, you're using the fire. That puts that much pressure on all the rest of the homeowners in Bullhead City. So I think you could rethink that and have a property tax taken out of the rent. So as you grow, 5 units is not going to make a big difference. 100 units is going to make a big difference for the fire and police and all the other services that your property taxes pay.
The property taxes here are county taxes. They're not city taxes.
Okay.
There are no city taxes.
Okay, but still.
But yeah, your point is well taken,
Yeah.
and it would need to be considered. But school district property is
Okay,
not.
school district, but it's not a school. It's school district property, but it's going to be housing, like my house up in Bullhead. And I pay taxes, a lot of taxes. For somebody not to pay that, it could put more pressure on everybody else. You might want to consider that.
That's a good question.
Thank you. Anyone else? Does the board want to do that?
I'm fine if they
Take a second question?
I think Dr. Stewart also had some questions, some follow-up on some earlier things, and then we'll get to second questions if people have second questions. I think if we go too much further than second questions, we might be here really, really late. So, and we'll try to write down your questions. So if you go through a couple of questions really quick, like we'll try to like write them down so you get them asked in your 2 minutes, and then we'll take some time to answer if we can, so if that helps.
I wanted to come back to something Ms. Garish had called yesterday, I think it was, and had asked some questions. I don't remember all of the items that you had, Ms. Garish, but I know one of them had to do with who's the developer. We don't have a developer yet. So we have to follow procurement. We will have to put those things out for, requests for proposals or bids and that kind of thing, and we'll follow all of the procurement. So I wasn't trying to avoid your question. It's just that we don't have a developer yet. We don't have those folks. What we have are those renderings. Okay, they're not blueprints. They are simply renderings. But I will be happy to send you a small version of those. I have those. You're welcome to have them. And I'm sorry I don't remember the other questions you asked yesterday, but we didn't answer them because we don't have answers for them yet. So it wasn't trying to avoid your questions. It was just that we're not there yet. Okay? So, yeah, and when we put out the requests for bids, it'll be to local contractors, local whatever, because we can't legally say we're going to select somebody local, but as much as possible, this board has said that when possible, we want to keep these monies in this community. We don't want the money to go to, if we can avoid. Sometimes we can't because we're supposed to take the lowest bids. And the lowest quotes and those things. But we will do everything we can to keep this money circulating in the Bullhead City and Mojave County community as opposed to going to Maricopa or someplace else.
Yep.
Can I follow up to her answer?
Do you want to do your you do a second round of 2 minutes? Go for it.
I won't even take 2 minutes. I
Okay.
just have a question. Because you're obviously, I don't know if most of you know, I'm on the high school board. And
speak in the microphone, please. I can't hear you.
Say Ashley.
This is Ashley Garrich. Are you ready for me, Burgess? So as far as procurement goes, we have to send out our, we have to have our 3 bids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct? And there's a lot of times that we don't get our 3 bids back. We have several projects that are out months in advance right now because we cannot get even a no bid, and that is the requirement, your 3 bids, and we're not even getting that right now. So I don't know if you've reached out at least to see if this is going to be a possibility to get your procurements back, because at this point, like I said, we're months out, and I'm sure that you guys have the same problem. And I'm sure that you've had to deal with the same things in the past with procurement. So what are you going to do if you don't get any bids back?
We will be looking for bids. I will say, though, that the community task, thank you, that's an excellent question. The community task team that Karen Summit put together, those folks have been involved in some of these meetings, and there's every indication that we will not have problems getting quotes and not have problems getting local quotes.
So as for procurement, like I know being in the high school district, like I've had to sit through procurement training where it was multiple hours over multiple days with he had a lot of munchisms. His name was Mr. Munch. He was able to answer a lot of those procurement questions. And if I were to go and seek out information, we'll say 3 quotes, $10,000 for 2 different football jerseys for home and away, because they really do cost that much. I could actually call a company, and if they don't give me a quote, there's a no quote sheet. So if they refuse to give me a quote, then I can go ahead and write that up. Obviously, when you're looking at giant projects, you want some submitted quotes. You want to be able to compare quotes, and we will do everything we can to receive multiple quotes. And as she said, we definitely want to keep things here in the community, but there are ways that we have to do those things. So we can't just sit up here and say, oh, we want to create a new job and give it to so-and-so. Like, you have to post it, you have to interview. So the same thing with developers, like we'd have to send it out there and we'd have to say, hey, who would like to bid? Who would like to be a developer? We'd have to interview, we'd have to do the things that we have to do to make sure that we follow those procurement rules so we don't get in trouble. So those are very important.
Sir, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just gonna, excuse me, John, just correct. I was just gonna make a comment that when we started, the comment was, it's a done deal. Maybe it's not a done deal, and I think we ought to keep an open mind. I was in government for 32 years. There's no such thing as a done deal, and I think you guys know that, right? Come on. Things look what happened 2 years ago. Things changed, man, and all of a sudden here we are with our pants down. You got employees. You got to fill $4 million if you don't get it again. That's a lot of people to absorb in this budget, correct? So I'm just saying, please keep an open mind, because a lot of people brought up some pretty good ideas. And if it was such a great deal that you could never lose the real estate, I would have bought a lot.
I'm going to ignore you one more time because Larry's got a question and he hasn't even been up there yet.
Oh.
Come on up, Larry.
Oh, sorry.
Hildy, you'll never live that down, Larry.
I sure will. Larry Morse with ARQ Engineering. Been a resident in the area for 30-some plus years. I want to commend you for taking steps to try to do employee retention, which is critical in our area. It's very hard to find anybody that's qualified to do anything. It's really bad. As an employer, I know that. I had a couple questions. One of them was on, this is federal money coming in, so all the federal procurement, including prevailing wage, applies for not only the district, but the contractors that the district hires. Okay. That's one thing. The other thing is recently, in the last 2 years, we've seen materials cost triple. They doubled last month. Not on top of the triple that was. I mean, we used to pay $16 a foot for an 8-inch sewer line. We're now paying $45 a foot. Material cost only. Anything like that, a water valve, an 8-inch water valve used to cost us $600. Now it's $2,600 just for one. Not installed, that's delivered to your site. That's about it. Just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's where we got our dreams crushed when, the original, grand scheme was 20 and now we're hoping to push 5 to 10. And it's because of things like that. It's unfortunate that we got hit with that time frame because that's a large increase.
Hildy.
Thank you, Larry.
Can you reach the microphone?
Don't let him do that.
So much. Okay, so in the beginning, Ms. Stewart said that anyone can go. It can be custodian, it could be an administrator. Who makes the decision? Who picks the people who get it? And what are the guidelines or their qualifications? You're going to have people submit like their histories. I mean, who gets it?
There actually would submit an application. At this point, we haven't come up with specific guidelines as far as who's going to be first and who's not. In some of the other teacherages here in Arizona that I've looked at, it was first come, first serve. Some of it was a committee was put together, and that committee determined who,
So it would not be the board? It would be a committee?
It would be a committee, or it could. In
Or
our
the property
case,
manager.
we're going to have a
Property manager.
property manager, so or management firm. So it may be them. We haven't really.
Right, because you said also that you thought there'd be like a big waiting list, but then again, you said that people can stay as long as they want, so
Well,
I don't really see how that
We
turnover
didn't
is
say
going to
as long as
go.
we want. We just said it wasn't permanent, it was temporary, but we didn't know how long yet. So we did say we didn't
There
know
will,
how long.
so there will be. So, the idea that they're going to save up enough money for down payment in a time frame that you're going to set is probably not real. But the other thing I wanted to say was Patrick Beck's assertion that no taxpayer money. I mean, we heard very similar things about something called the Field House. And I believe last fiscal year, the taxpayers, the school district, paid $160,000 out of their budget to make up for the losses of the field house. So there's never anything definite. You cannot say the taxpayers will not pay. I'm not saying that should be your overriding decision, but be careful because you cannot say that. Thanks.
You have a Zoom? Oh, well, can we do Zoom and just?
Oh.
All right, so Amanda, I'll try to just give you the questions. Okay. All right. So first things first, has the board read the exit surveys of the employees who left last year? I don't recall a discussion at any board meeting about you guys actually seeing the 40 plus staff members exit surveys and the reasons why they left. And I know for a fact that there was a portion of them that were not due to housing. So that's first. I also want to ask about the $2,500 incentive bonus. Again, that is not given to every educator in the district. That was for a certain amount of the teachers, certain teachers, I believe. I don't know if administrators got that. I don't know if additional paraprofessionals received a bonus. So saying that that would be in place of a housing expense stipend, that would also not, there would be a discrepancy there. There are sites, you have 6 sites in this district, and there are multiple problems at every single site. And I've gathered a list of those problems because my whole thing, as many of you know, because of my educator club, is to advocate for the educators in this area. And they have a lot of burden on them right now. And so I want to make sure, yes, and I'm not saying that this does not have its pros to it, and I'm not saying not to help anybody. That's not what I'm trying to put across. But when you've got 5 units, let's say they're the 1-bedroom units, that's 5 people, how many employees do you have in the elementary district? That's a real crooked seesaw there, I think, that you would be helping 5 out of 200 to 300 employees. So I have to advocate again, and I know you said money went to the sites this year, but there's still teachers who don't have air conditioning and heat in their classrooms as of April 6th. That's an issue. Thank you.
Someone want to answer those?
Okay, so first one, board exit surveys. If they're read, 40 plus teachers that left, were they surveys read. Mr. Burgess, are you on?
Yes, sorry, I'm here.
Okay. Did you read any exit surveys at the end of last year?
I personally did not see 40 exit surveys, no.
Okay. And then I know
But I did see some.
And then I remember Dr. Stewart talking about some of the things in the exit surveys before. You've read exit surveys, have you?
Yeah, but it's been a few months. So,
okay.
But I think the point is the current board should probably look at those exit surveys and also the ones that come this year as well.
Okay. I did not read 40 plus exit surveys. I did not get 40 of them. No.
I didn't read.
And they're brand new. They're brand new. So. So can we pull those 40 plus
Absolutely.
exit surveys so then the
Absolutely.
5 of us can get some of that
Yes.
information of what they previously have so we can take a look at it?
Absolutely.
Okay. 2,500 incentive bonus not given to everyone. So in the talk, correct me if I'm wrong, but support staff and transportation also received risk compensation and...
The risk compensation was for every employee, and based on the recommendations of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee and the administrative team, every employee had the same amount, which was $2,000 in risk compensation. The only reason it would be less is if folks were here less than the full year. In terms of the $2,500 signing incentive for this year, that was for teachers. As things happen in the year, things that have been budgeted for any of these grants, sometimes we don't fill a position, or sometimes things don't cost as much as we thought they would. And Mrs. Lott is always busy looking for ways to use those funds in a really positive way. So the intent this year is there are funds for us, even though there were not signing incentives for classified folks. There will be some funds for that. It won't be $2,500, but it'll still be a significant amount. So we want to look out for all of our employees when we can. And to correct something that Ava said, the $2,500 is in this, for this coming year as well. So, so it's another year of that.
Excellent.
But only one more year, yes.
Because the money
Currently,
will run out. Yes.
currently, because that's where it's
Currently.
sustained is in the ESSER. Yes, currently.
Right, so that's
Yep.
not a sustainable piece that would then match the.
Right, that's why they are risk compensation and incentive signing bonuses and not salaries, or is because they are not sustainable.
But if we're using that as a reason where you're saying no housing stipend for the other employees.
No.
Yeah, we definitely haven't used it as a reason for not a housing stipend. We just said that that is a benefit we do offer currently. Those are things that we do for our employees currently.
So when that runs out and the employees who are being housed and gaining that, let's say $2,800 due to the 20% and all that, what are your other employees who are not gaining from the housing piece, what are they getting?
She's basically saying that, like, what do the other employees who are not in the housing projects, what are they gonna get as a benefit? Because the housing people are getting a benefit.
Because it's, the goal of this is to retain teachers.
So, okay. I see what you're saying, because you're wondering how are we giving these added benefits, but they're paying rent just as they would pay rent somewhere else. So we're giving them the opportunity. I understand that, you know, it's not $2,500 or $2,800 roughly. We'll just say, using like the figures you used per year, it's not $2,800 that the 5 are going to receive because they happen to be in a teacherage housing that allows them. So I understand what you're saying. But we do offer a lot of different things that and you know, I hate to say it, but we did just increase all of our coaches' stipends, our instructional. We have instructional coaches. We have 8.
Yeah, but not sports coaches.
We're not talking.
We just did all of our clubs.
We
We
need-
just did all of that.
Excuse me, Ms. Amon,
I
we
just
need to
want to
stop
remind
for
you that
just
the
a
topic
moment.
tonight is the
We need to, okay.
construction of this
We had
project.
lost our internet. We just.
I
we
saw
wanted
it
to
jump,
stop.
but I wasn't sure if
Yeah,
it was.
I'm sorry. It's
was
back
on or
now,
off.
so.
Didn't we? We went through and we increased all of our club and organizations, our coaches. Didn't we increase all of those, because that was one of the big. We did all across 6 sites. We did every single leads. We did everybody, everything that has an extra stipend that you can work. So moving on. So 6 sites, problems at each 6
You have a
sites.
question,
Right,
Oh.
but she had some other questions, so I wrote down all of them.
Okay.
So
We have a statement from Zoom.
I'm still replying to her
I'm sorry.
questions. She has said 6 sites. There's problems still currently at 6 sites. And then one of them specifically was there's no AC or heat as of April 6th still in at least one person's classroom.
Replacing 60 to 70 HVAC units is in the ESSER funding.
And
ESSER 3.
3? Okay. And that was something that we've been working on for quite a while now. So that is something that's working on. However, if you don't have AC in your classroom, please speak with your building administrator. Is there an open classroom? Can we accommodate? Because
can do
it's
that.
100 degrees out and they should not, you know.
Absolutely. And we are regularly filing requests with
And
the
SFB grants and-
with the State Facilities Oversight Board. And in fact, you know, each week I'm signing at least 2. So we've got a good person who's handling that and making sure we're on top of it. But we still have the 60 to 70 that are in the plan, and that whole project will be part of what the new construction manager will be taking on immediately.
Mr. Toonforce, are we getting off topic?
A lot.
Yeah.
Our comment from the web?
Listening to all of the discussion, I can't help to think this will drive a bigger wedge between community members and teachers, as well as different teachers within the district.
Yeah, it's just a comment.
That was a comment.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Sir?
And again, my name's Bill Ernest, and I work over at Bullhead City Middle. If we were able to fund the $2,500 signing bonus, say in perpetuity, 10 years, would these new teachers that are getting that housing get that $2,500 signing bonus?
That's a good question.
Then there would be an equity there. Would be my question on that. Thank you.
I will say that a lot of the questions that you've asked tonight, they've all been writing them down. I see 3 of them writing right now. So they don't have the answers for every single question, but they are all questions that they also want the answers to. Is there anyone else? Sir.
My name is James, and I've heard a lot of questions from some folks that, that I know to be elected officials in the area. So my question for them, if you have other school board members and county supervisors and candidates and things like that, my question for them is, what would you like them to do with this money? I mean, you see that they've spent it. You see how they've spent over $10 million. So my question is, for $2 more million, what would you like to see? I saw a lot of I don't like this idea, but no, I think it should be put towards this. I think it would better serve the community of this. It was just, I don't like it.
And I appreciate your comments, but our questions tonight are for this board, not for the public. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, would the board like to make a final statement, each person?
Well, I just say I really appreciate everyone that was here and still here. A lot of the things that we're looking for, you guys brought up a lot of really good things that allows us the opportunity to go back and delve deeper. I mean, we do a lot of research. Each one of us up here has been on, at least I can talk for, well, at least the 4 here, I assume Corey as well, looking into this, trying to find out the information, especially, we took our sections and we're delving into those. We're trying to figure out what we can do to help make this work and make it a positive thing for our community and our teachers, and retain those teachers and keep our teachers. Because our teachers that are here, our teachers that are in our classroom, they work hard and they should feel supported. And that's what we're trying to do. And we just are trying to find another way to support them. And that's what we're trying to do with this. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your feedback. Anybody else?
Ms. Diaz?
Mr. Burgess, do you have anything?
I think you said it well enough. Thank you.
And I did want to say one thing.
You're good. Go for it.
Okay, I just want to, again, thank you for those who did come and who did have questions. And I do encourage, if you have concerns and questions, to bring them to the board when you have these concerns. Because a lot of times, I'm new to the board, but even being new, I've realized that sometimes people will hold these things in, and then it's not until someone makes a hoopla about it on Facebook that people find out about it or anything like that, because there were so many people who thought that this was being hidden from the public, even though it was talked about multiple times, and I do understand. I'm new, so they had started this before I got here, but I'll be honest, I wasn't sure about this project at first until my rent started going up and they raised it 3 times before it got to where it was. And I started doing more research into this project, and I had actually bookmarked a few schools that have teacherage, and each one of them had rent under $700, and it was something I legitimately considered, even though leaving Mojave High would be devastating to me because it's the high school that I went to. I absolutely love it there. I am a highly qualified, certified math teacher, and I know that if I wanted to go somewhere, I could. And they were the sites I bookmarked. They were the first schools that I thought that if my rent got to the point that I could not afford to live here anymore, those are the schools that I would go to. So the idea that this would not work or the teachers would not be interested, I still have them bookmarked just in case. I'm just pointing that out, okay? So I thank you, though, for people who did come with their concerns and didn't just decide to rant on social media and have absolutely no input or into this process. Thank you.
Mrs. Sabrowski?
I just want to thank everybody who joined us online or in the room. I think that we learned a lot tonight. We listened And I think what you have told us or asked us, we'll go to our hearts and we'll get it done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So as we get opportunities and as we get in this process, we'll be able to gather some more of this information and be able to get those answers. Many of them are going to take a little bit of time for us to even get a chance to figure out, because it might be later on in the process or as we gather more information, we will get it out. I can foresee another forum, another town hall coming at some point here to kind of discuss some things, because this is probably the best information that we've received in pretty much a positive way. I mean, even comments and questions, they're positive. They're helping us develop this, and that's what we need.
Dr. Stewart.
The last thing I would say is the invitation that you have from the board members to contact them. If you do so via email, please make sure, if you are contacting all of them at the same time, that you do it in the BCC part of the email, not in the copies or not in the to, because if you don't do it that way, it puts them at risk relative to open meeting law. So none of them could respond to you if you don't put it in the BCC. So it's not that we don't want you to communicate with them, but let's do it so that they don't run the risk of being in an open meeting violation. And you can always send things to me, and I will do things the best to get back to you.
And that's a great comment, because that does happen sometimes, and we promise you we're not ignoring you. A lot of times we forward it to Dr. Stewart to allow Dr. Stewart to address it. But if you send the email to Dr. Stewart and BCC each board member, we then can respond to you individually. Okay? So that's for any topic. It needs to go that way. All right? Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
And I also
Chinsler, for
thank
being here.
everybody for being here.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
You're done.